Good readers always revisit the text. So in this video lesson today, I'm going to walk you through elements to notice while we are rereading the text. So we have finished reading the introduction and chapter 1. Let's take a second look. Okay, so let's revisit the title of the introduction. You should have your books open to page 1 of the introduction, and you have your copy of the Freedom Walkers close reading chart in front of you. So let's take a look at the title, Why They Walked. If you would, take a moment to share why they walked. Answer the question. In your answer, let's hear who's the they and why do you think they walked? So after having read it, please pause and share your answer to the video. Let's go ahead and share our thoughts through the introduction. So in this introduction, I'm going to play it, stop, and let's say something. Okay, so actually I'll be reading it. Not so long ago in Montgomery, Alabama, the color of your skin determined where you could sit on a public bus. So even right there, you're having some thoughts because at this point, when we reread, we already read to understand it. So now we're reading to have our thoughts. What is the author doing? What is the author showing us? How do we think the author feels about the text? How do we know this? You could sit on a public bus. So I'm saying it says not so long ago. Well, this is 2022. And so not so long ago, we know the text happened in the 1940s. And it was several years ago, several decades ago. So I see that the author is being casual with us by saying not so long ago. We find out immediately it's in Montgomery, Alabama. So we know it's taking place in the South. And we see in the first sentence, the color of your skin determines where you could sit on a public bus. So we have to ask ourselves, why do we believe the author used this sentence to open the text? What is the author revealing? How do we feel the author feels about the subject? If you happen to be an African American, you had to sit in the back of the bus, even if there were empty seats up front. I wonder, why is it the author said, if you happen to be an African American? Why did the author use that term? It seems as if the author may believe that it was unfortunate to be African American. So now notice, I'm reading between the lines. I'm showing you what I'm thinking on a deeper level about what the author has written. So I see the author has opened up the text mentioning the color of our skin immediately, and it seems as if it's going to be unfortunate for anyone who's African American in Montgomery, Alabama, not so long ago. Paragraph 2. Back then, racial segregation was the rule throughout the American South. Strict laws, called Jim Crow laws, enforced a system of white supremacy that discriminated against blacks and kept them in their place as a second-class citizen. So here, again, it seems informal. Back then, why hasn't the author used a date? Why not just say in 19? So it, by the author saying Jim Crow laws and back then, it lets me know that he's writing to an intelligent audience. So I'm assuming who's reading this book. So it's somebody who's intelligent. You don't have to include the date. See, if I can tell this was written maybe for educated people, those students who may be in middle school, for example, like yourself. Obviously, that you were just born in the 2000s, so you wouldn't be able to, associate the time. If he were writing for you all, he would say in 1940 because it would be informative. But it seems as if for him saying not so long ago, that's for someone like me or your parents who um, may have had a parent or a grandparent who grew up during that time. He mentions the Jim Crow laws. So, in mentioning the Jim Crow laws, notice how he says it was strict. So there, I can also believe that this author is not on board with Jim Crow laws. And so, good readers, when you go back to reread the text, once you understand the text, your purpose is now to make sense of it. How does the author feel? It's all about the author. How does the author feel? What is the author doing? So let's see what the author is doing. So we see the author has established setting. The author is providing context. So if you're like, well, hey, why was it unfortunate for uh, African Americans in Montgomery long time ago? We see immediately the government was involved, and it had to do with rules. So then, if you want to be upset or if you're like shocked, he lets you know, hey, 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 hold on, hold on. The government was involved. Paragraph 3. People were separated by race from the moment they were born in segregated hospitals until the day they were buried in segregated cemeteries. Blacks and whites did not attend the same schools, worship in the same churches, eat in the same restaurants, sleep in the same hotels, drink from the same water fountains, or sit together in the same movie theaters. So let's see what the author is doing here. He introduces Jim Crow laws. Now he provides a clear picture. So now I see the author is clarifying what it means to keep whites and blacks separated. Look, that's what paragraph 3 is doing. It provides a detailed list of how everybody was separated. So it answers any question you may have as to, hey, what does it mean for blacks and whites to be separated? Paragraph 4. In Montgomery, it was against the law for a white person and a Negro to play checkers on public property or ride together in a taxi. So I'm wondering if he already gave examples. They couldn't go to the same schools, worship in the same church. What was the reason for him to go ahead and provide this example to say it was against the law for them to play checkers? So say, watch, let's read between the lines. Who's playing checkers? You play checkers with somebody you're social with, someone you're friendly with. So it's saying here, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with just the color of your skin. We are not even allowing you to be friends, right? So why else would he share that Negroes and whites could not play checkers together? Because you have to immediately think, if he already said you can't worship at the same church, go to the same schools, eat at the same restaurants. Okay, those are strangers. But you're not strangers with somebody you're playing checkers with, okay? Or riding in a taxi. If you're riding in a taxi with someone, you're feeling really comfortable about them. So, right here in the text for page 1, just taking a moment, I provided several examples. So what I'd like for you to do is pause the video, and for page 1, I'd like for you to write a reference you heard me make in the text and then share what I said about the inference. Page 2. Let's take a look at this photo, okay? So here in this photo, let's write caption. Picture. Caption is more than a caption, it's a picture. Let's say it's a picture. So let's read the caption for the picture. A segregated trolley. We know segregated means they're not together. Car in Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta is in the South in 1956. So it's time period. So we see the 50s. I can infer, obviously, there had been no civil rights movement in the 50s. Why? Because I can see in this picture, they're still segregated. Black and white passengers were separated by law on buses, trolleys, and trains throughout the South. Okay, so I'm taking a look here, and we can, and everybody seems okay with it. I'm just going to say from an inference, just looking at the faces, it looks as if, nobody seems angry. It just seems the way it is. So from the picture in 1956, I'm seeing that it's just the way it is. Nobody seems angry or upset. Everybody is seated. And that's just one inference I'm drawing here. Also, at this time, if you would, pause the video, share an interpretation that I've made, an inference, that I made from the text, or you can share your own. There are several that you can make here. I notice I do not see, as far as I don't know, it seems as if the white women are sitting alone. The white men are able to sit together, but then I do see black and whites are able to sit together in the back. What kind of inference can you make about that? Okay, so let's go ahead and read page 2. So let's put page 2 here. And you'll be filling in the blank on your own chart. Most Southern blacks were denied their right to vote. You have to ask why. And why did the author say Southern blacks? So during this time period, were Northern blacks able to vote? The biggest obstacle was the poll tax. What's this poll tax? Oh, look, the author tells us in the next sentence, in the same sentence. A special tax that was required of all voters, but was too costly for many blacks and for poor whites as well. So I'm asking myself, who put a tax in place for people to vote? Think about that. Why was, and I want you to draw your own conclusion. I want you to make your own reference, your own inference here. Why would the government charge anyone to pay to vote? Is it to prevent a barrier, or is it to create like a hardship for someone? Why? What is it that you think? Voters also had to pass a literacy test. Literacy meaning being able to read, to prove they could read, write, and notice how he mentions a word and then he goes on to define it. All right. So he may very well be writing for a younger audience, because the more educated you are, you understand what literacy means. So that makes me wonder, why didn't he share the purpose, the dates? Why? Oh, and maybe going back to page 1, maybe he said not so long ago, because it is for younger readers. And it's like, to young people, if you were born in 2000, 1990 is a long time ago. 1980 is a long time ago. So why would he say in the 1940s? That's just ancient time for somebody who's 13 years old. Okay, let's continue to read. Voters also had to pass a literacy test to prove they could read, write, and understand the U.S. Constitution. Why? Why do you think that was? Why do you have to show you understand the Constitution? And how do you think that's different from today? Do you think everybody understands the Constitution, even though they're voting? Are we just voting based on popularity? What do you think? Should we have to understand the Constitution in order to vote? Just curious as to what you think. These tests were often rigged to disqualify even highly educated blacks. So now we're on page 3. So stop to take a moment. We have to make some inference from, I just walked you through several thoughts on page 2, and then finally on page 3. And I just even want to say it was rigged. So notice the word rigged. See, if you pay attention to diction, you'll always be able to determine how the author feels about a text. So he uses the word rigged. That's a negative connotation. It has negative energy attached to that word. So I can tell the author is not okay with how the poll tax was established to keep people from voting. Page 3. Those who overcame the obstacles and insisted on registering as voters faced threats, harassment, and even physical violence. Let's talk about that. So the blacks who obviously overcame, they could pay, like there was the poll tax, right? Most people didn't have the money for it. Then there's a literacy test. Most blacks at that time could not read. But then finally, those who had the money, they were educated and could read, it says they overcame these obstacles and they insisted on registering. Why would you be willing to face threats, harassment, and physical violence to vote? What does that reveal to you about the importance of voting? Right? I'm interested in knowing what you think here. What inference can you make about someone who is willing to face a threat, harassment, just because you want to stand in line and vote? Somebody's going to bring negative energy into your world. They're just going to mess up all over your day. But you think it's worth it. What do you think? Would you submit yourself to that type of energy to be able to vote? What do you think? As a result, African Americans in the South could not express their grievances in the voting booth, which for the most part, grievances. So here they have grievances. You know how if somebody does something wrong, you get to tell. You can teacher or you could tell your parents. The government, according to the author, the government, well, according to history, was mistreating the Negro population, the African American population, and they had no one to tell. So it says here, they could not express their grievances in the voting booth. They didn't like the way things were done, but they couldn't add their voice to it because they were being stopped. No. So apparently some people were like, oh no, I am not trying to die to vote. They can have it. And so they didn't vote. All right. Which for the most part was closed to them. But there were other ways to protest. And one day, a half a century ago, that's the first time the author used a number, a half a century. Centuries, 100, half a century, 50 years. Hello, Miss Hightower. The black citizens in Montgomery rose up in protest and united to demand their rights by walking peacefully. Why did they walk peacefully? What was the benefit in walking peacefully? What does that reveal? Okay, what type of people walk peacefully? So to me, if you are walking peacefully, you are not trying to attract any attention. You're not trying to do any harm. We don't want to bring any negative energy your way. This is what I'm thinking the people are saying. We just want our rights. Look, we don't, what is it? We won't start anything. We're not trying to mess with anybody. Just leave us alone. We want to be able to vote. It seems like the people are tired. And it ends by saying it all started on a bus. So before you move on to the second part of this activity, you should have text written here. Okay, so you're writing your notes as to what happened. So let's just say here, just as I said, by walking peacefully. So I'm going to put an example. Notice I have quotation marks, by walking peacefully. And then over here, what can the reader infer? The reader can infer the African Americans were tired. They just wanted to be treated as equally as their white peers. All right. So notice I just have a piece of the text. Here's the page number already. And what can I infer? It does not say this in the text that they were tired. Where does it say they were tired? It doesn't. I read that it says they walked peacefully. And I just ask myself, who's walking peacefully? What type of citizen is wanting to do something peacefully? That's somebody who's just like, look, if I walk peacefully, you won't bother me. Please leave me alone. I don't want to be harassed, threatened, murdered. I just want to show I'm upset. And I don't think we need to be treated this way. Do better.